Going into this movie, I knew absolutely nothing. No trailer, no reviews, didn't even know which studio was behind it. Which is impressive, considering it's the Amazon-owned studio that blessed us with War of the Worlds. When we bought our tickets, our cashier literally said to us, "Enjoy an unintentionally really funny movie." And that's when the panic set in. Because there's nothing more terrifying than realizing that you're about to watch a movie that doesn't know what type of movie it is. So let's sadly talk about Mercy. Let me quickly run you through the movie. If you've already seen it, use the timestamps below to get to the actual reviewing part. Mercy takes place during 2029, where the justice system has been fully automated. At the center of it is Maddox, played by Rebecca Ferguson, an AI-powered judge that determines guilt, sentencing, and execution based on probability, data analysis, and predictive modeling. Chris Raven, played by Chris Pratt, is a former detective who wakes up after a memory loss bender on trial within the Mercy system, accused of murdering his wife Nicole. The twist? Instead of being investigated by the system, Chris is given a limited amount of time to prove his own innocence before Maddox reaches its final verdict. Most of the film takes place with Chris physically restrained in a chair inside the Mercy court, talking almost exclusively with Maddox and a handful of characters via screens, calls, and surveillance feeds. As the clock counts down, Chris is forced to retrace old cases, strained relationships, and buried decisions, all while the system that's supposed to be unbiased begins to show cracks. And that's the idea, at least. I'm going to be breaking down this film by 6 different categories: videography, editing and CGI, pacing, performance, score, and its story/script writing. Each category is rated out of 5 and then averaged out into an overall score, which then I'll place onto Letterboxd. Alright, let's get to the full review. Videography. From purely a technical standpoint, the movie is clean. The image quality is solid, the specs are definitely there, and it's very obvious that expensive equipment was used. That said, having good gear doesn't always mean you know how to use it, and this movie is big proof of that. Now, talking visually itself, the movie was lazy. For what feels like the entire runtime, we hard cut or cross dissolve between maybe 5 total shots of our main characters, Chris Raven and Judge Maddox. It also gets repetitive fast. One of the most frustrating things that I noticed, which also cuts ties into the story itself, was that Maddox had the ability to place Chris into a fully realized 3D scanned environments of what they're talking about, like placing Chris virtually in the middle of a speed chase, but they never use it for the actual crime scene. They almost never use it, period. Instead of using this high-tech equipment, feeling like Connor from Detroit Become Human, Chris sends his partner Jack, played by Kai Reese, to physically walk through the crime scene on FaceTime. Why? During my pre-production research, it looks like the film was shot on an IMAX certified digital camera, and majority of the shoot taking place inside of a volume stage, meaning massive LED walls and over 100 motion capture cameras. You know, the same breakthrough technology that was used in The Mandalorian. Scenes where the environments could dynamically move around Chris could have been the easiest effects to be done. And they just don't do it. They have this awesome film tech just to be FaceTiming people. I feel like if the movie took place in the different locations of whoever he's speaking to, would have come off so much cooler. Kind of like what they did in Sorry to Bother You. There are also moments where like 3 characters would appear on screen at once, but they're framed so tightly that nothing breathes. One standout example is when Chris is on FaceTime with his daughter Britt, played by Kylie Rogers, who my buddy immediately recognized as the girl who drank paint and Beau was Afraid. And shout out to my buddy again, because he's the one that came up with this reference that the framing of those calls genuinely looked like the dreamlike sequences from Lord of the Rings. This entire movie has the energy of something that was shot in like 2.5 weeks. Any B-roll outside of the actual court is either stock footage, full CGI, or quick iPhone and GoPro shots. And Ring, I guess, fuck. The strangest choice in videography happens near the end though. For almost the entire movie, Chris is sat in a chair, which made me assume that we were seeing everything from the court security cameras. But with about 15 minutes left, when Rob drives through the lobby and Chris gets out of the courtroom, the movie suddenly switches to handheld camera shots, which are definitely not security camera angles. It felt wrong for a minute to have that random switch, but honestly, it didn't take me long to just not care about it, because at least for the last 15 minutes of this movie, it felt like I was actually watching a movie. 1 out of 5. Editing in CGI. Compared to War of the Worlds, this editing style works a little bit better here, and this is kind of how I put it in my mind as a video editor myself. War of the Worlds felt like everything was done on Premiere Pro, but Mercy, at least it feels like they opened After Effects a couple of times. On strictly a technical level, the animations were clean, but that's pretty much where the praise stops for the editing in CGI. The editing feels like it was chopped, pasted, and organized by an AI. The movie uses what they call the screen life format, and while this is probably the best version of that format we've seen, that doesn't mean it's good. Anytime text appears on screen, it's scaled up so aggressively that you could only read 2 words at a time. All the while, the motion blur is cranked up all the way to 360. You can't read anything anyways. It literally hurt my eyes. Outside of conversations between Chris and Maddox, as I mentioned earlier, nearly every single exterior shot from the courtroom is either stock footage, full CGI, or quick throwaway inserts. It's obnoxious noticeable. The reuse of assets on top of that is insane. Every single time Chris searches the database, the exact same typing animation plays over and over. Like, we get it. He's searching something up on Google. The budget for this movie was reportedly $60 million, and most of that clearly went to Chris Pratt, Rebecca Ferguson, and the CGI team. And honestly, the effects didn't even stand a chance to fixing this shit show. You can't model or shape a vase if the material you're given isn't clay or mud, but just straight dung. 1 out of 5. Score. The score definitely fits the movie. It understands the tone it's aiming for, cold and sterile, and never really clashes with anything that's happening on screen. From purely a atmospheric point, it does the job. But that's kind of the problem with the score at the same time. The score never evolves. It never escalates tension, never deepens emotional beats, and never adds urgency to the countdown that the movie is supposedly built around. For a film structured almost entirely around time pressure, the music should be doing a whole lot more heavy lifting in the process. Instead, it just sits in the background, repeating the same hum over and over, almost like it was used as white noise to keep the audience awake rather than invested. There are many moments that feel like they're begging for some musical emphasis, and the score just shrugs during those scenes. 2.5 out of 5. Performance. On paper, the casting works. Chris Pratt is fairly believable as a worn-down former detective breaking sobriety, and the supporting cast is more than capable of handling heavier material. There was nothing really wrong with the actors here. The problem is what they were given. No performance can survive a script, especially a script that doesn't trust its own logic. You could have put Denzel Washington in that chair and the outcome would have been the exact same. I mean, last year we got a prime example of that with Denzel Washington in Spike Lee's terrible flop Highest to Lowest. The dialogue and motivations just aren't simply enough. That said, there are moments where actors try to inject weight into the dialogue. Chris Pratt has flashes where you can see what the role could have been with a better script and clearer direction. But the dialogue is actively trying to work against the actors. Emotional beats feel rushed or completely unearned, and the characters are constantly forced to explain the plot rather than embody it. There's no room for subtlety because the movie is obsessed with moving information forward, even when the information they're delivering literally makes no sense. And as a result, sadly, the performances feel flat. 2.5 out of 5. Pacing. There was a kid in the theater, probably like across the aisle from us, who would not stop playing with his cup and the cup lid. If a 10-year-old is this bored, the movie failed. At least Mercy has the courtesy to include a countdown timer on the screen for most of the time, making sure to remind us Don't worry, there's only 30 minutes left of this shit. It takes nearly half an hour of Chris overreacting before he just suddenly switches into full detective mode. Instead of a gradual shift, like a character slowly locking in on the mission, with Chris, it's like someone flipped a switch to go from 100% anger to completely none. The pacing collapses because the story collapses. And on top of that, the movie is just too damn long, like I mentioned in the title. This could have been a short film. 0 out of 5. Story/script writing. The idea of this movie is very interesting. An AI-run court system deciding life or death is a genuinely compelling concept, especially in today's day and age with AI tools and generation everywhere. The execution of this movie is unbelievably stupid though. Maddox has access to every camera, every phone, every archive from the last 20 years, enhancement tools, and a fucking quantum computer. Yet it's up to the prisoners themselves to solve their own case. Why? Why would you not use the quantum computer to solve the crime instantly, within seconds? But no, instead, Maddox glitches out because Chris had a gut feeling. The logic just never holds. Chris proves that Rob is the one who killed his wife, and Rob's motive is that he wanted revenge for his brother, who Chris had previously sentenced through a mercy trial. Rob's motive is weak, but whatever, I'll ignore it. What I can't ignore is that Rob also planned a full terrorist attack on the Mercy Court. So I ask, why frame Chris and blow up the building? Because if you think about it for just even a second, you'll realize that if Rob didn't plan on blowing up the building, Chris would have been successfully executed. It's only the terrorist plan itself that becomes enough proof against Rob that he's the one that killed Chris's wife, even though the two crimes still have zero connection to each other whatsoever. And there's barely any actual evidence placing Rob as the one who murdered Nicole. Maddox even admits earlier that potentially someone staying overnight after the barbecue doesn't prove anything. But moving away from the plot holes that it creates in on itself, the dialogue is horrendous. It feels like the script was AI generated. And fuck, the final oomph line delivered by Chris Pratt, whether we're AI or humans, we all make mistakes, is fucking insane, considering this AI decides who lives and who gets executed. And just in case the movie didn't have enough going on in itself, there's one final twist. Jack is revealed to be dirty. She destroyed evidence that would have proven Rob's brother innocent because the first Mercy trial needed a guilty verdict. So now, Rob's brother is still dead, Rob will be likely executed by the Mercy Court itself, and Jack will also probably be executed by Mercy. All because of a gut feeling. Are we serious? 1 out of 5. Mercy has an interesting idea, but buried under lazy filmmaking, terrible writing, and baffling creative decisions. It completely throws its talented cast, its budget, and its concept straight out of the window. This shouldn't have been a feature film. If anything, it needed another draft. And another one, and maybe one more draft after that. So, to wrap up this shit show of a movie, averaging out all of the scores, we get a final verdict of 1 out of 5. Maddox should judge this movie in the Mercy Court because it's guilty as fuck for wasting my time and needs to be executed. If you enjoyed this review and somehow disagreed with it, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. If there are any new movies coming out that you'd want to see me review, be sure to throw those down in the comments as well. Thanks a ton for watching all the way through. Have a great rest of your day.